Hey everybody, just wanted to come on and give you what I put on the radio this afternoon on the radio on in Massachusetts on 93.7 FM SCA1. So if you're in Massachusetts, feel free to check it out Wednesdays at 3 p.m. On the radio. But I was talking to a lot of Generation Z, and they do not actually use the radio, or they're always connected via an app. So I'm going to play what I played today. It was an interesting conversation I had with George, who was somebody I've had on the podcast. So if you want to listen to the podcast, feel free to follow me on Instagram. And there you will be able to get the link tree and get all the information about the podcast. I have an interesting conversation with Judy, who will be the episode for tomorrow. But as of today, I'm going to show you guys what we talked about for the Z, and check it out. All right. So feel free to comment. Let me know if you guys like this content. Apologize that there was some kind of technical difficulties with the Zoom when I was recording it. But it's an interesting conversation. So check it out. And we'll check you tomorrow on the podcast. All right. So here we go. All right, everybody. I am here with George Lauren. He was on the Youth Ministry and Mentorship 101 podcast, and now he is here from his home, and we're going to have just a fun conversation today. How you doing today, George?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I'm excited to be back here. Hopefully, we're gonna have a little bit of fun on here. Hopefully, not only have a little bit of fun, but maybe open some eyes a little bit to spread some awareness on this subject. I'm excited. I hope you are as well. So I'm ready to get into it.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right, so let's just get started by saying um, the guilty pleasure that I have is I am a wrestling fan. I enjoy professional wrestling. Of course, the number one product is WWE, World Wrestling Entertainment, but I used to watch WCW. I'm aware of NJPW, which we know as New Japan Wrestling, Ring of Honor, and of course, the new promotion that has just come up that is buzzing in the professional wrestling world is AEW, All Elite Wrestling. Now, this topic is being talked about everywhere. Wrestling podcasts, professional wrestling journalists, people even in sports entertainment in the WWE universe are talking about it, because AEW seems to be the number one promotion to actually seem like it could affect the business of WWE. It hasn't been this way since the Monday Night Wars with WCW. TNA tried to do it and it failed miserably. It's now just Impact Wrestling, which is not even close to even coming close to what WWE is. But the reason why they're saying this is because a lot of disgruntled WWE wrestlers have wanted out of their contracts and have wanted to join AEW. Um, Most notably, a wrestler by the name of Dean Ambrose in the WWE universe, who has joined AEW as John Moxley, and he is loving his life right now. He is enjoying wrestling. He is having fun. He is making money, and he has opened the eyes to many that what happened in the WWE isn't, even though it's the biggest promotion, it's not the greatest. So it made me realize that WWE, even though it's making a lot of money, is on the decline, as people may say. Now, George, you are another professional wrestling fan, man. You love it, you watch it, comment on it, you have a YouTube about it. Give me 3 reasons why WWE is on the decline.
All right. And we're gonna talk about most of these reasons in depth. I agree with everything you said. You know, I was born right around when the Monday Night Wars were started, and I started watching at a very young age. You know, I remember all the times like late at night on a school night, I would sneak downstairs, be putting on USA Network, and then my mom would come downstairs yelling at me, tell me to go to bed, and then I would just go back downstairs to watch, you know, John Cena or CM Punk, you know, in the main event of Monday Night Raw. And SmackDown, I didn't get to watch SmackDown that often because most time it was on Friday nights and that was Sabbath, so I don't have to watch the highlights online. And you know, over the years, I'm still a huge wrestling fan. Still a huge wrestling fan. And as much as I love WWE, there's a lot of problems with the company. And, you know, we'll go through a couple of them right now and then we'll see if we can relate it to the church. Three main things, and I could give you a whole list, but just three of the biggest things is one of them is the decision making of the head man in charge, Vince McMahon. All right, and we'll talk about him in a little bit. He is the boss. He's the big honcho. And you know, as much as he's done great things for WWE and the wrestling industry, he's also caused a lot of problems, especially in recent years, and it's really not helping the company at all. Even though WWE is making more money than it's ever had in its existence, it still has a lot of problems that are driving fans away to some of these other promotions like AEW, which we'll get into. Another thing is a lack of consistency. So one of the things that was great about wrestling back in the day is it was very consistent with its booking, with the way it was structured. Now, the way the company is organized, you know, basically they're doing stuff on a week to week basis. They don't have a long term plan in place. And when you don't have a long term plan in place in not only wrestling, but in business in general, in life, you know, it could cause a lot of problems. And we can definitely relate that to the church. Another problem we'll talk about is evolution. All right. Evolution. And one of the things is the company has not evolved with recent times. You know, some of the things you see the company do was things that they did way back in the old days, which was successful at that time. But now we got WB. One thing that they don't understand is it's 2019 and it's a completely different generation of wrestling fans. So definitely we're going to talk about that and how we can relate that to the church because just by those big three bullet points you can see a lot of similarities between WWE's decline and the problems in the church, and I'm very excited to talk about those.
Wow. When you stated all three of those reasons, one thing came to my mind. WWE, after the Monday Night Wars, when WCW was their main competitor, it would actually, and when we talk about Monday Night Wars, for those who aren't wrestling fans, it's basically WCW's show would come on the same time as WWE's Monday Night Raw. They had what they called Monday Night Nitro, and Nitro was, I believe, 8 to 10, while Raw was 9 to 11.
Raw was like 9 to 11.
Yeah, Raw was 9 to 11. And I think if I'm not mistaken, Nitro was 8 to 10. So if you were a fan of both, it was difficult during the 9 o'clock hour, but you still had 1 hour you could check both promotions separately. But then there would be situations where big matches would be at the same time, and they would do that on purpose so that they could detract, you know, ratings and who would be the winner of it. Yeah, and that was the big controversy. So during that time, WWE had something they called the Attitude Era because it was filled with amazing ideas, great characters. I think many here, even if you're not a WWE watcher,
you'll recognize some of these names.
You would know of Stone Cold Steve Austin, and of course The Rock, who is Dwayne Johnson, who is killing it in the box office now. And we could even say at the latter end, Dave Bautista, who is also killing it in the box office. He was in Avengers. These big names John Cena is not that era, but I would say
It's a big, yeah.
the pro,
He's getting there.
yeah, well, I would say he's what do you call it? A byproduct of that era.
Mm,
There wouldn't be no John Cena if it wasn't for
an
the
attitude
Attitude
era.
Era and Dwayne Johnson and Stone Cold Steve Austin. And it was because of that competition and they were uncomfortable that led them to do such things. Now that they've been comfortable, it led them to all these things which have led to their decline. All those three reasons: Vincent Kennedy McMahon making all the decision making.
Mm.
Um, what was the second one? No consistency, because they're just when they see something not working, they pull the trigger too quickly. They're not investing in their talent and their up and coming stars. Um, and lastly, they're not recognizing the times that they're in. So let's talk about each point by point and then relate it to the church. First one, Vincent Kennedy McMahon. I love saying the Kennedy. Making all the decisions, and if it's not approved by him, it doesn't get done. Um, how do you see that differing from how AEW is doing things?
All right. So for Vince McMahon, back in the day when first WWE was coming on the rise, he made a lot of the main decisions, but he had a team around him, and plus he was very very open to other superstars giving their own ideas, offering storylines, things they want to do with their own characters. All right, Vince was much more easier to work with. As he's grown, as time has gone by, you can clearly see if you just watch some of the stuff he does on television. Because remember, the business side of WWE and the television side are two completely different things. But if you watch Vince's TV character, you can see some of his real life personality put into that character, and you can tell he's cocky, and you can say some of that cockiness he has a right to, because he's built the WWE empire. He's probably the biggest factor in it. But as time has gone by, you can say he's let some of that cockiness go to his head. If you look at WWE, the way that the company is structured these days, you can clearly see that it's Vince. He's the head honcho, and around him are clearly a lot of yes men. All right, people that will do anything just to get his approval. They're not really looking, oh, what's best for our product, what's best for our talent, what's best for our fans. No, they just want to get stuff done that Vince is going to approve, Vince is going to like. So, because one thing that you hear a lot is, oh, Vince firing a lot of people for if their ideas don't agree with his. And some people that work for Vince are scared to step up to him because they don't want to lose their jobs. And you can clearly see that because half of the stuff that you see on television is just Vince's ideas. And it's ideas that they're not getting with the fans. They're just ideas that he agrees on, and it's hurting the product. Each and every week that you watch Raw or you watch SmackDown, you could clearly see, oh, this is Vince's ideas, and nobody is there to put him in check because everyone's scared to step up to him. And it's hurting the product, and it's driving more fans to these other promotions like AEW. They just had their first pay-per-view, and if you look, a lot of their talent, I'm not going to say the majority, but a lot of their talent are former WWE superstars that worked for WWE in the past and maybe either got fired or left or took a break and decided to go to AEW. And it seems like by the day, if you follow WWE, the more and more you're hearing of superstars want to get out of their WWE contracts and move to AEW and some of these other promotions, because there at AEW, the people running it are more open to allowing their talent to give ideas, pick where they want to go with their character and their storylines. And in result, you're getting these awesome pay-per-views that AEW is putting on. You're getting, like, for example, AEW, they're having their second pay-per-view, only their second. Think about it. They had their first pay-per-view like a month ago in Las Vegas on Double or Nothing. But their next pay-per-view, I believe, is in August, I believe. And it's called All Out. And legit, it's in Chicago, and they sold out of tickets in legit 15 minutes. And yes, WWE is over here making money, but they're struggling to sell their shows. They're struggling to sell out their pay-per-views. And the fact that you have AEW only on their second pay-per-view as a wrestling company, the fact that they sold out their show in just 15 minutes, and WWE is supposed to be the standard for wrestling, it tells you something. And I'm not sitting here saying, oh yeah, AEW, is 100% better than WWE because, AEW just started. But the thing about it is you can clearly see that AEW, what they're doing is right now, they're doing stuff successfully. And as time goes on, if WWE, doesn't want to make changes, there's going to be trouble. But I think we'll get into that a little in one of the other points. But yeah, Facey, Vince being on top, making all these decisions by himself, it's not helping. And the people around him, they're not helping either. They're not making the problem any better. And when you have other people that are more open to ideas, it creates a better environment. It makes the people working there more happy, and it makes a more successful product at the end of the day.
So relating that to the church,
Mm.
and I'll give it to you in a sec, but it made me think of how um, the church sometimes believes there's one way to reach the people, and I think WWE is coming to that same realization. They are using social media, they are using their YouTube, but I think AEW and these other promotions understand that there's other ways to reach the people, because you said they have two pay-per-views that are sold out. WWE is well known, and the reason they're well known is because they have what we call the major TV deal. They have they're on USA Network, and SmackDown in the future will be on
On Fox.
Fox, and they even have their own network, WWE Network, that you can subscribe to join in like Netflix. So they have this forum that they can reach all these people. So people should be therefore buying into their shows, while AEW has only the buzz of social media, YouTube with the Young Bucks' YouTube channel being elite, and their house shows and their appearances in the independent scene, and yet they're selling out shows. So it makes me realize that one thing the church needs to learn from WWE is there are different ways to reach the people. Different ways to reach the people. So don't think that you have a certain if you're thinking inside the box that there's only one way to reach the people, or this is how we reach the people in the past, door-to-door evangelism, television, but it's time to start thinking outside the box into reaching people, and that's what I think WWE is starting to see. What do you say about that, George?
I agree, because you look at you mentioned WWE, they have the social media, they have a lot of the tools that young people can connect and relate to. But you see with AEW, they're just starting up, and they're reaching not only their talent, but they're reaching fans in different ways. Like for example, on WWE with their scheduling, the superstars so many days a year, missing holidays, they're missing time with their family, stuff like that. But W superstars, their schedule is much more flexible, and they're allowed to go work with other people, other promotions, which WWE doesn't allow. If you look at the church, and you see everything that goes on there, yeah, the church, and it depends on, but some churches out there are just not as open to change as churches are. And they want to bring in all these new ideas to the leaders in charge. They don't want to completely change the entire structure of the church, but they just want the church to, accept those, and some of the things that they want to do to bring change. And some people,
Oh, I lost you for a second.
we good.
Yeah, yeah, you're kind of all right. Okay, yeah. So I think you're back, but one thing I wanted to add to that point is
We
um
good.
yeah, yeah. I got you. Do I still have, let me pause.
I'm not sure what happened.
Yeah, but one thing I wanted to add to that is
Yeah.
one thing I noticed is in AEW how it's basically it's fresh and new, but like you said, they're working with other like they let them work not necessarily with, you know, big promotions where there's clash. You know, there was something with Pac the other day and
Yeah.
stuff like that. But the let them go to the little independent ones. They will let them work in the community, and that gets the buzz going, and it gives them and it gives freedom. I think WWE is a system of control of their talent, while AEW is a system of freedom. And I think that when we have, if we enable our youth in the church and our young adults and our members in the church to be free, not necessarily meaning you can do whatever you please, but the freedom that is given to you in the gospel of Jesus Christ, will see happier people rather than saying that the church is a system of control, because I feel like that's what WWE is. WWE is known for their lawyers, their control, and their lengthy
Yep.
contracts and their
Uh,
exclusivity. You're not allowed, and it's a grueling schedule. You're not allowed to have that freedom like in AEW, where you get to go to these little tiny promotions and um, you know, you get to make all your money on your merchandise, while WWE you only get a percentage, and you're working all these grueling hours. So let's go into point number 2. You said, what was point number 2 again for us, Joy?
I said lack of consistency.
Okay.
So basically, if you watched WWE, and basically one problem that the company really has, like we said, the company is making so much money, more money than it ever has. Merchandise sales are through the roof and all that, which is good for the business side. But when you watch the product and the fans that are loyal, that what do you watch WWE for? You watch it for sports entertainment and wrestling. So, some weeks if you watch WWE, you will not see, and like Raw is like a 3-hour program. It goes from 8 to 11 each night. You won't get even an hour of wrestling on there. You'll just get a bunch of backstage segments, interviews, and sometimes it might be a little entertaining, but for the most part, no, because we our talent wrestle in the ring. And it's a lack of consistency with also not only that, but you see the booking of the talent. So say you have a champion, one of your superstars is a champion right now, and I don't know, let's just say Seth Rollins. You may know him, but he's the current Universal Champion for the company. He's like the biggest champion that the company has right now. And the thing about it is, when he's your champion, he's supposed to be booked like a champion. He should be booked like he's the best in the company. He shouldn't be losing unless you're giving the title to another name. He should be winning all his matches. He should be booked strongly because he's the champion. He's your number one guy. But one thing that WWE does a lot is they'll have their champion lose on a random edition of Raw, and for no reason. They'll just do it out of the blue, and it'll get people angry because why is he losing? Like, what point? Well, like, where is it going?
Mm.
And it's something that we talked about earlier with this long-term booking. You want your storylines to have a payoff, and you see with that lack of consistency, you're fooling superstars. You're making your product not look believable. And yes, WWE is it's fake and everything like that, but it's sports entertainment at the end of the day. You want to keep the people invested. You don't want to fool their intelligence. You don't want your fans to feel like they're being played or feeling like they're stupid in a way. And WWE doesn't seem to understand that. Back in the day, they were way better when it came to consistency. But today, they just go, hey, we can do whatever we want because we're making so much money. And it really shows on television that, yes, you can make all the money in the world, but you're not putting out a good product at the end of the day. It's one reason why people are only other, because their consistency with their booking is so much better.
Yes. Um, I would liken that point to the church in these two things. One is um, hypocrisy in the church, but we're always going to face that. But the other one is with the consistency, it's like they're not investing in the long term story with certain characters or superstars, as you would call them. Um, they're not willing to give that long payoff. And that long payoff, it takes patience and it is an investment because you're not going to get immediate results. But what makes things something really successful, what makes someone really successful, is delaying that gratification immediately and waiting for it to pay off, not eating, um waiting for that plant to grow and waiting for the fruit to ripen before just eating it immediately, you know?
Hmm.
So I think that's what the church needs to do, because what does the church usually do? They don't really pay attention to young people because why? They're not paying tithe yet. They're not paying offering yet. So they don't want to invest in them.
Yeah.
And they lack the patience to engage with them. And what happens? You lose the consistency of the gospel message, which is to reach everyone. And that's the whole point. So, and that's what happens with WWE. WWE is about good guys beating bad guys, and we're told to buy into these good guys. In wrestling, they call them faces and heels. You're told to buy into these faces, and especially when you start to like a face, you want to see them win. And then next thing you know, they get what we call in the wrestling buried, when they keep losing and losing and losing, and they keep losing to these bad guys, and then you just stop caring and you don't want to care for the character anymore. And that's what I think happens with our young youth and young adults. It's like they're getting told they're the church of tomorrow, they're the church of today, they're the church of tomorrow, they're the church of today, and then they're treated like the church of yesterday, as I was told by some young people. So that can be extremely frustrating. As a When you see that as a wrestling fan, it makes you want to tune out. And as a church goer, you don't want to go to church anymore. What do you?
Yeah.
Give me 2 seconds on
Um.
that.
Basically, I was just thinking. You see that a lot with the relationship between older members of the church and the young people. And one thing, one example that came up to my mind is at Seventh Day Adventist church. You see and not all Seventh Day Adventist church, but a lot more you're seeing Seventh Day Adventist church. Trying to move from the format of having a Creole service and then having an English service, because you're seeing a lot more of the young people. They're not fluent in Creole, but they still want to come to church. And at one thing that was happening at a Seventh Day Adventist church that I know of is basically there was an issue where they and this happened recently. They were starting this whole English service at the church, and the first couple weeks it was doing really successful, but the some of the older members were just they weren't really behind it, because they felt like the English service was taking away from their service in a way. And and I remember they tried this in the past a couple years back, and there was different leadership at the time, and it only went a couple weeks and fell through. There was no consistency there. And young people, they may not understand all the ways the church work, but they're smart enough to know that if a program's going to work, you have to keep investing in it. You have to be consistent with it. And as time goes by, God will do his work, and the product will be blessings for everyone, and you'll see stuff being done in people's life that you've never seen done before. And one thing that you got to tell these young people is keep working. Do not stop. Don't stop, because the second you do stop, that's when everything is going to fail. It could take months, it could take days, it could take years, but if you keep working on it, eventually, because one thing that I've learned in my life is God doesn't do stuff on our time. He does stuff on his time. And if you're patient enough to let him work, eventually blessings will show. So WWE, if they were more consistent with its booking, the product would be, more successful. Same thing with the church. No matter what's going on, as long as you're consistent with what you're doing, you have faith, and you continue working at it, God will come through, and you will see blessings that you never seen before.
Yeah. So you got to be consistent with the message, and the gospel message is the greatest message of all time. It is life changing. It leads to eternal life. So we definitely, more importantly than what WWE is doing, definitely the church needs to be proclaiming it, being investing in everybody, and being consistent and not being hypocrites about it. We can't be talking about the church is the church for the young people. It's the church, and the young people are the church of tomorrow, and they're the church of today, and not empowering them and giving them the payoff, because there's young people in those pews who are hearing those words and they're waiting for the payoff. I was one of those young people who said, "You are the church of tomorrow and you're the church of today." You know what I said when I went home? I said, "I'm the church of tomorrow. I'm the church of today. I need to get working now. I want to work now." So what happens to that young person? They come to church and they say, "I want to get to working now." So when you tell them no, that's what happens. All right, let's move on to the third point.
All right. So the third point is evolution. All right. Evolution. So one problem and one major problem that WWE has today is a lot of the stuff that worked in the past during the Attitude Era, back when the company was at, its best during the Monday Night Wars, is um it worked during that time. But you gotta understand is the WWE fans that were there back then, it's a completely it is all right. And yes, you do have those long-term fans. Eric, you're one of them. You've been watching since you were young yourself. I wasn't born during the Attitude Era, but I went back, I've watched the Attitude Era, and I love it. It's way better than the product that he's putting on right now. But the fact is, you can see some of the things that worked back in the old days just doesn't work today. But Vince keeps trying to, push those old ways onto the company now, and it's failing because one thing is the fan base is much more smarter. They know a lot more about how WWE works than it does. And one example I'll give, and even if you don't watch WWE, you may have heard this on the news, something like that, is two legends of WWE, The Undertaker and Goldberg. Right? Even if you've never watched WWE, you've probably heard their names some way. All right. They had a match at a recent WWE pay-per-view. All right. And thing about it is 20 years ago, and the way the match was advertised is first time ever. And the Undertaker and Goldberg, they wrestled in the late 90s, early 2000s. That's when they were at their best. All right. But now in 2019, they're both 50-year-old men that don't have the same amount of skill or ability that they had back then. Their bodies are just not the same. Father Time has come to them. But the thing about it is instead of investing in the talent that you have right now, WWE continues to go back and pay all these old superstars to come back, and they're just not the same. As great as they were in their prime, they're just not the same that they were back then. This is a new generation of superstars, and a lot of these superstars have way more talent than the generation before them, but WWE fails to use them, and it's why a lot of people get frustrated with WWE because the roster that they have right now is more talented than they've ever had in the history of their company. But they decided to go back and get superstars like Undertaker and Goldberg. And the match they had at this recent WWE pay-per-view was awful. It was terrible. Absolutely terrible. The two could barely lift each other up. They're 50-year-old men with old hips and old backs, and they just can't go at it anymore. But Vince thinks, oh yeah, just because there were big names back then doesn't mean they're going to give you a good product right now. And that lack of evolution, instead of building up the current generation, you're relying too much on the old generation. And their time, has passed. It's time for a new generation to come in and do the work. And you can directly relate this to the church you see today. Eric, I'll let you chime in.
Oh my goodness. That point, I was chomping at the bit to come in, because these points right here, I don't care who you are, if you're a church goer or a wrestling fan, whatever, you can understand this point right here, because it's frustrating. Because what's the other thing? Why is these characters so famous? Because they were invested when they were younger in their era. Goldberg became Goldberg because when he was in WCW, long-term storyline, which was he was unbeatable. He went around I would say almost 2 to 3 years, and he would never lose a match. He had an undefeated streak. He had one of the longest undefeated streak in pro wrestling today. The Undertaker was well known as somebody who was basically unstoppable. It's that aura about him. That's what makes his legend so great in WWE. He was basically the sort of the Goldberg character for WWE, in the fact that he was this tall, domineering man who couldn't be defeated. And same with Goldberg. And that was invested in them to make them the names that they are today. So it is time to invest in the younger generation and let them build a name. And that is exactly what the church needs to do. The church needs to understand that the reason the older generation is so good at what they do in the church and make a good church program and a good church evangelistic series and all these things is because they were invested when they were younger, because they were not 40 years old 20 years ago. They were 20. So they were given a chance to learn how their field and get better. And now at an older generation, now that they're an older age, they are more experienced and more enabled to do what they do. But now it is their turn to empower the young people, because that match you mentioned, that match went terrible because their old bodies, as you said, could not take it. They couldn't lift each other as well as they used to. That spot should have been given to two younger wrestlers and given a chance to do so. So in the church, we need to empower our young people. And yes, they're not as big a name as the older generation are, and they haven't succeeded in anything big yet, but we have to give them a chance and let them build that relationship with Jesus, that reliance on the Holy Spirit, so that they can bring change to the church, that they can bring the gospel out there into the world. So, man.
And the thing is, the thing that we gotta remember here, we're not saying when it comes to the church, I'm not saying here that we don't need the old generation. I'm not saying that we don't need the old folks. We need their wisdom. We need them to help us, grow, teach us how the church works, how to make it successful for God's work. All right. What I'm just saying is a new generation is coming up. One day the old people will not be there anymore. One day it'll be the new generation time, and that time is now. And I know WWE fans, when it comes to saying that time is now, they think of like John Cena. One thing that John Cena said, I was, reading a recent interview. John Cena, he's probably the most known WWE superstar, even though he's more of a part-timer these days because he's working more on movies. But he said himself, he's about to turn 43 in a couple months, and he said, hey, I'm thinking about retiring. Because as much as I love WWE, the same person I was 10, 15 years ago. This new generation is much faster. They're stronger. They have different styles than I grew up wrestling in. And the new generation, their time is now. We have to start teaching the new generation how the church work, how to get the job done. Let them bring their ideas to the table and work with them. Not just say, no, this isn't gonna work. All right. If we put trust in them and we let God work through them, these ideas can work and it'll bring success to the church, and you'll see a lot of more people coming to Christ. And that's something we have to let the new generation know at the end of the day. We have to let them know that they matter. Their ideas are just as important as the old generation. And we have to work together for the kingdom of God.
Oh, George, beautiful. I'm just gonna end in saying this. I think what maybe in the mind of some older generation, when we're saying younger generation need to have an opportunity, that they're saying, oh, that means I don't have a job anymore, and that's not what we're saying. And I think that's what you're saying as well. We are saying that you're not ending your job. Your job role is just changing.
Yeah.
Like tying back to WWE, we're not saying Bill Goldberg and Undertaker, they should be gone from wrestling. John Cena as well. We're not saying they need to disappear from wrestling. We're just saying your role needs to change. Now, you should be a teacher. You should be teaching the younger generation, like going over their matches and all the, well, we're breaking kayfabe right now, but you know, they're the ones that should be telling them, you know, how to work matches, how to do moves, all these kinds of things, how to work the camera angles. And some wrestlers are doing, older generations are doing that, but that's how it should work. That's how the cycle works. It's not saying that once a younger generation comes and takes takes over a position, it's not you lose your job. It's just now your role has changed. So I think that's, and I think that also is empowering. That also is empowering, knowing that you're not static in ministry. You know, you're not staying in one area and you're doing one thing all the time. You get to do different things. You get to do as time goes on. And I'll end on this, like the example of Moses is, you know, Moses, when he was 40, he was young, he was strong, and he was intelligent. So what did he say? He said, I'm gonna liberate Israel through military might. I'm a general. I was taught by the Egyptians. So I'm going to overthrow Egyptians by how I was taught, by military might. And then he had to flee to Midian, and then he spent 40 years, and now his role has changed, and he's become meek, and he's leaning on God. And then he learns it's not by my power, it's by God's power that we will free the Israelites. And then as he is a leader for the Israelites, wandering the 40 years, he knows that his role has changed as well, and he becomes a mentor to Joshua. So God gives us all a duty, but don't be afraid to understand that as time goes on, he has called you to empower other people in their jobs that God has given them as well. So, and I'm gonna give this disclaimer because I can feel, you know, people saying, man, guys talking about WWE and wrestling and all these kinds of things. First of all, listen, I already said, George and myself, this is our guilty pleasure. People who say wrestling is fake, yes, so is Empire, so is every other show, so is Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones didn't happen, okay? Okay? So if you enjoyed that show, all right, Avengers didn't actually happen, okay? Thanos did disappear half the universe with snapping his fingers. It's fake, but you all enjoyed it. You guys all bought your tickets. You all got your subscription to HBO. So listen, don't be coming down on George and myself because we have this guilty pleasure of watching pro wrestling because it's fun. Hey, and God is working on us. If we're not supposed to be watching it, God is working on us, and we will eventually stop because God is most important. Right, George?
Of course, man. You said it best at the end of the day. Yeah, I know. I just want to thank you, Eric, for letting me back on the podcast, man. I enjoyed doing these. I hope everyone enjoyed watching this, man. At the end of the day, we're just servants of Christ. At the end of the day, trying to do His work, and that's all we can do at the end of the day till His second coming.
Yeah, so we just wanted to have this conversation because I think it was fun, and I've seen some other pastors liken what you can learn from Avengers and stuff like that. So I was like, man, let's talk about how WWE is similar to the church. So George, I thank you so much. Tell the people where they can find you. Like on your socials and stuff like that. George, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Tell the people where they can find you. You know, if they've been following your content.
All right. Yeah. Basically, if you guys want to hear me talk more about, WWE, sports, anime, anything like that, you guys can subscribe to my YouTube channel. Go to YouTube. It's Fitzmonk TV. So FITZMONK space TV. There's a whole story behind the name. I don't have to get into that just now, but yes, you guys can find me on there, and hopefully you guys enjoy that if you go check it out. But yeah, there you go, Fitzmonk TV on YouTube.
All right, Thank you so much, George. This was fun. God bless.
Anytime. God bless everyone.